A few days ago, I talked about the disconnect between professional critics, the people getting paid to review games, and the actual audience. At first glance, it looked like a standard difference in taste. Reviewers prioritizing polish and accessibility, while gamers prioritize depth and freedom. And that kind of disagreement is usually normal in this industry, but looking at the data recently and watching Asmongold upgrade his rating to a near perfect 9.5 out of 10 while blasting Western critics, the situation has evolved into something much more significant. We have moved past a simple disconnect into a full-blown culture war. When the audience fundamentally rejects the premise of the critique itself, it suggests we are looking at a structural problem. The IGN review we looked at was rejected outright. 11,000 dislikes. And if you scroll down into the comment section, you realize this isn't standard internet toxicity. It is a loss of faith. Dislikes usually indicate disagreements with a score. Well, here, they indicate a rejection of credibility. The audience is going beyond simple disagreements. They are stating they don't believe the job was done correctly. One comment put it bluntly: they aren't ignorant, they are malicious. And this reflects a growing sentiment that mainstream outlets are no longer neutral observers, but active participants with an agenda that aligns more with corporate interests than player interests. There is a suspicion building in the community that the Western industry sees these ambitious, maximalist games as a threat, because while critics were complaining about polish and paperwork, players were noticing that this free-to-play title runs on a proprietary engine that puts modern $70 releases to shame. And the argument is simple, right? If a free-to-play game can offer better performance and more features than a premium Western title, it threatens the justification for the $70 price point. And one of you mentioned your friend is playing this on a GTX 1650 at 60 FPS. In 2025, that is a technical miracle, and yet the review completely ignored it. By omitting this, the review failed to inform a large portion of its potential audience who are desperate for games that actually run on their rigs. So today we're going to figure out exactly what is going on. We are going to look at the civil war happening inside IGN, the learning curve that filtered the critics but hooked the player base, and the undeniable soul that the players found hiding in the jank. But of course, if you enjoyed this kind of content, a like on the video and a subscribe to the channel is always appreciated. Let's get into it. When you look at a ratio like this, right? 11,000 dislikes. It is easy to write it off as internet hate. We usually assume it is just a mob of angry fans, but if you actually read the comments, the reality provides a different perspective. These comments read less like harassment and more like a necessary correction of the record. The audience is looking at a major media outlet and signaling that their authority on the subject has collapsed. This collapse stems from a failure in competence. A critic is expected to understand the mechanics of what they are reviewing. The smoking gun here is the combat. The reviewer's main complaint was that the fighting felt slow, describing it as boring, rinse and repeat cycle. And on the surface, that sounds like a valid criticism. But then the community started digging, right? They looked at the footage and the reviewer's own comments to see how they were playing, and the viewers pointed out immediately, and the comment section confirmed it, that the reviewer voluntarily chose to play a tank build. I mean, a tank is usually designed to be big, heavy, and slow. Choosing a class designed for slow play and then complaining that the gameplay is slow is a contradiction. I mean, it doesn't make sense. It is like choosing a heavy-duty truck in a racing game and complaining it doesn't handle like a sports car. To make matters worse, right? He also admitted to using the auto parry feature. This is an accessibility setting that automates defensive mechanics. By turning this on, you remove the need for player reaction. You literally remove the action from the action RPG, and then you're complaining about it. It doesn't make sense. But anyways, to recap, right? The critic picked the slowest character class available, turned on the setting that plays the game for him, and then complained that the game felt unengaging. He manufactured the very problem he complained about. There is a comment on the video that sums this up perfectly. This sounds like someone who only plays racing games was asked to review Elden Ring. You cannot objectively review the speed of an action game when you are actively refusing to engage with the action. This attitude bleeds right into the rest of the critique. The reviewer famously described the game's depth, the housing, the jobs, the martial arts systems as piles of paperwork and bureaucracy. He treated these systems like homework he was forced to do. review. This highlights the fundamental disconnect. The critic is playing to finish a job, while to him, complex menus and deep systems are obstacles getting in the way of him going home. His goal is completion, not immersion. The players, on the other hand, are trying to inhabit a world. To a player, those piles of paperwork represent content and value. They are the reason you play the game for 300 hours instead of 30. The critic saw a checklist of chores. The gamer saw a sandbox. And when a reviewer can't tell the difference, they lose the right to tell you what is good. And the confusion deepens when you look at what happened 3 days later. This is where the story shifts from a bad review to institutional inconsistency. Usually when a major outlet gives a game a 6 out of 10, that is a death sentence, right? They bury it and move on because there is so many better rated games like Dragon Age The Veilguard.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
Or maybe Concord, am I right? But just a few days after labeling Where Winds Meets a dizzying mess, IGN released a second video. This indicates that the editorial side of the outlet recognized the game's popularity, despite the review side dismissing it. Rather than a correction, maybe apologizing, maybe clarifying, instead of that, it was a high-energy guide video titled 10 Things to Do First. I mean, a guide implies that the game is worth playing, am I right? A direct contradiction to the review's conclusion. The tonal whiplash is enough to give you a neck pain. In the first video, the reviewer sounds like he was being held hostage, monotone, exhausted, conveying avoid this game. But click on the guide and you step into a parallel universe. The narrator is upbeat, helpful, and tells you to not panic because he is going to help you start on the right foot. This tone conveys you should play this game and here is how to have fun. But the craziest part is that they are describing the exact same mechanics in completely opposite ways. In the review, movement bugs and jumping inconsistencies made traversal sound like a nightmare. The guide, however, enthusiastically teaches you how to unlock fight mechanics so you can travel the world with, and I quote,
but to do so with oh so much style.
One framed complexity as broken, the other framed it as a skill to be learned. The reviewer called side activities distractions, the guide calls them expanding your repertoire. One called it a filler, the other called it content. This is more mixed signals than the one my crush is giving me. The internal contradiction here is so strong, it resembles a civil war within the company. It is as if the guide team didn't get the memo from the review team that the game was supposed to be bad. It exposes a lack of editorial cohesion. The audience noticed this immediately. The comment section on that second video is absolutely brutal. One comment sums it up perfectly. First game to get a second video after getting a 6. The audience sees exactly what this is. Double dipping. On Monday, the outlet was a prestige of being the tough critic. But by Thursday, they realized the game is so massive and they want the revenue and the clout from the millions of people searching for tips. I mean, you know this already, right? Guides generate views for years. They want the short-term prestige of the review and the long-term revenue of the guide. They try to tell you that the game wasn't worth your time while simultaneously begging for your clicks to show you how to play it. And when you try to play both sides like that, you usually end up pleasing neither and you will look like a clown, which you probably already do. But to really understand why the review failed, we need to look at the actual player experience, right? We need a control group to see if the game is actually broken or just difficult to learn. The community's experience over the first week provides a perfect counterpoint. Because here is the thing, most players didn't start out loving it immediately. In the beginning, their experience actually mirrored the IGN review. They felt weak. They felt like they were hitting bosses with a wet noodle. Many complained that the mechanics felt rigged. This validates that the reviewer's initial feelings were not unique. The game is confusing at first. For the first few days, the average player was in that same exact boat as the critic. But this is where the paths diverge. This is the filter. When the critic hit that wall of difficulty, they mentally quit. They decided the game was badly designed and retreated to a tank build to automate the problem away. The players, however, assumed the problem was them. They internalized the problem, realizing they simply didn't understand the game yet. I mean, you are all gamers, right? That is just what gamers do. They realized they had missed key systems, like the medical upgrade menu for those who don't play RPGs. That basically means fighting endgame bosses with level 1 health potions. Players were unintentionally playing the game on hard mode because they ignored the menu. And then they figured out the combat flow. They learned that if you knock an enemy down, you don't just keep spamming light attacks, you follow up with a heavy attack for for a massive damage, making combos. This is a specific mechanical interaction that rewards game knowledge. It sounds simple, but as soon as players learned that interaction, the game changed. The bosses that felt like damage sponges started getting defeated easier. The combat that felt slow becomes more explosive, and the game rewards knowledge with power. The sentiment went from complaining that the game was rigged to screaming that it was peak. In fact, after sinking over 100 hours into it, Asmongold updated his review score from an 8.5 out of 10 to a 9.5 out of 10, explicitly calling out the maximalist design as the future of the genre.
I would actually increase my rating at this point to a 9. I think that after playing the game more, I think it's closer to a 9 or a 9.5 game for what it is. It's an incredibly high quality, very good game.
Explore.
Yeah, the future of co-op and MMOs is going to be a model like Where Winds Meet or like Monster Hunter. That's the future.
Where the critics saw a design flaw in the learning curve, the gamers saw a barrier to entry for a masterpiece. I mean, this is the key takeaway. Where Winds Meets isn't a broken game, it is a game that demands you pay attention. It filters out people who refuse to learn its systems. Whether the game is a 6 or a 9.5 out of 10 depends entirely on whether you are willing to learn the game. So what did the players find that the critics miss? They found the soul of the game. And the soul here refers to that intangible quality of a game that feels alive, reactive, and respectful of the player's agency. Interestingly enough, it starts with the technology. While reviewers were nitpicking technical polish, the community noticed something that matters a lot more. The game actually runs. We are living in an era of Unreal Engine 5 slop, where you need a high-end computer just to get a stable frame rate. But players are reporting that Where Winds Meet runs at 60 FPS on a GTX 1650. And for those who are not tech savvy, that is a graphics card that belongs in a museum. This accessibility is a massive feature that critics ignored because they likely play on a high-end review rigs. Beyond the tech, there is a level of unhinged freedom here that Western AAA games have largely legislated out of existence. Western design often focuses on guardrails, preventing the player from breaking the immersion or the script. This game removes the guardrails. There is a story going around that sums this up perfectly. A player took a special pill from the trickster sect and suddenly started uncontrollably farting gas clouds, eventually forcing them to desperately fan the gas away. You might roll your eyes and call that a lowbrow humor, and it is, but think about what that actually represents. It represents a physics system and an interaction engine that allows for unscripted, emergent chaos. It means the game has systems for gas, wind, and player status effects that all work together dynamically. Most modern games are terrified of letting you do something weird because it might break the immersion. This game hands you the tools and said, go ahead, be weird. It prioritizes fun over dignity. This agency extends to the storytelling too. We are not just talking about dialogue trees anymore. We are talking about actual AI integration. One player shared a story about meeting a monk who refused to accept help because of his vows. In a normal game, you would have to find a specific quest item to change his mind. But in this game, the player just started debating him. They used the chat feature to roleplay, arguing that they weren't bound by the monk's rules. And eventually, the AI monk conceded the argument. This is using language as gameplay mechanic. Another player described using the Karen strategy, completing a quest not by fighting the bandits, but by yelling at them until they gave up. This goes beyond picking option A or B. You are interacting with a world that pushes back. The world feels alive because it reacts to you, not just your button inputs. And if you don't want to be a hero, you don't have to be. The comment section is full of people who are completely ignoring the main story. They are building houses, they are opening restaurants, they are playing Chinese chess in the park for hours. They are treating the game as a Stardew Valley simulator, living out that fantasy of being banished from the hero's party to live a quiet life in the countryside. The game supports multiple fantasies, not just the warrior fantasy. And it goes back to the thing I said in the beginning. The critics look at this game and saw a checklist, but the players saw it and found a sandbox that distinguishes a mere task from a genuine experience. But where does this leave us, right? For a long time, outlets like IGN acted as the industry's gatekeepers. If they gave your game a 6 out of 10, that was usually it. Game over. But this situation proves that era is officially dead. A bad score didn't kill Where Winds Meet, it damaged the reputation of the people scoring it. We have reached a point where players trust their eyes more than they trust words. Why watch a review video from someone who sounds like they're doing detention homework where you can watch a streamer actually play the game and decide for yourself? Live gameplay exposes the reality of the game in a way a written or scripted review cannot hide. Reading through the comments, there is a very specific specific suspicion growing in the community. A lot of you feel like Western media grades on a curve. You see $70 Western releases, games that are often buggy, restrictive, and safe, getting 9s and 10s. Meanwhile, ambitious Eastern titles that offer hundreds of hours of content for $0 get nitpicked to death. This perceived double standard erodes trust. It is beginning to look less like criticism and a lot more like protectionism, when top creators are openly suggesting that Western media is trying to minimize and destroy Eastern games to protect the status quo. The 11,000 dislikes on that review stop looking like hate and start looking like a rejection of the entire Western gaming apparatus.
I think that the big reason why these games are getting rated negatively and people are being negative about them is very simply because they are Chinese. I think it's because they are Chinese video games. These developers these journalists and these websites do not want to have Chinese video games and other video games that are outside of their scope of influence come into the market and then be able to release products without being accountable to them. Because Chinese developers are not accountable to Western woke journalists. They're not accountable to a cancel campaign on Twitter. They're just simply going to make whatever video game they want, and if you don't like it, you can suck a fucking lemon. That's it. And so that's the reason why journalists rate these games so negatively. That's the reason why, and you'll see this happen probably with Tides of Annihilation. You'll see this happen with, you saw this happen with Stellar Blade. You saw this happen, and I know that's Korean, but like in general, I think it's Korea and China. I think it will also be India as well. Any region and any company that doesn't kowtow to the way that they view things and the way that they see things, I bet Lords of the Fallen 2 will also be rated negatively because they have attractive women characters in them. The fact is that these companies are parasites. They are parasites. They are against you, the player, and their job is to make your video games bad. That's what they want to do. They want to make your video games garbage, and the people that don't listen to them, they will lie about, smear, and misrepresent.
Because if a free game can run better and offer more freedom than a $70 AAA product, it threatens the entire business model. If a free becomes better than premium, the premium market collapses. Now let's be real, Where Winds Meet is messy, it is janky, it throws way too much at you all at once, it lacks the streamlined polish of a Sony first-party title, but in an industry full of interactive movies that basically play themselves, players are desperate for agency. They want a game that respects them enough to let them fall, to let them learn. They want friction because friction means they are actually interacting with something. It is creating a weird dynamic where a bad review from a major outlet is actually starting to look like a marketing asset. It is the inverse scale. If they hate it, it is probably interesting. If a critic complains a game is too hard or too complex, players now hear, this game has depth. So I want to ask you, do you think this is just a temporary trend, or have we permanently passed the point of no return for traditional game criticism? Let me know in the comments below, but that is all from me, 𝗖cie𝗽𝗆𝗆𝗵𝘁, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.